you would help people get to this, what we call an aha moment. They'd find some sort of magical value. And if you're deeply technical, it's a super grep. We're grepping across all the different boxes. We're finding that log line we need to solve our problem.
Jake Flomenberg, thank you so much for being on my show, 20-Minute Leaders. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Great. Where are you calling from right now?
I'm calling from sunny Menlo Park.
Wonderful. So we're very, very close by neighbors, but with this COVID situation, it doesn't matter if we're 2 miles apart or 1,000 miles apart. So either way, thank you for being here. Very brief overview, and then we're gonna do a deep dive into your experiences. Worked with so you did a UPenn and then Harvard MBA. Went on to working with the founders of Cloudera as I think the first business hire, and then running the Splunk UI product, which I've used extensively back in my years of engineering and the IDF, and now moved on to being a venture capital partner at Accel Ventures and Wing VC. Did I get that somewhat right?
Roughly correct.
Wonderful. Jake, I still can't do enough service to the incredible background that you have. I'd love for you to tell me a little bit more about yourself, and then I'd really love to pick your brain on these experiences moving from engineering, working with incredible startups early on, like Cloudera and Splunk, and then making that smooth transition into venture capital, and some of your insight into your investment thesis and how you approach different opportunities.
Sure. So why don't I give you sort of a quick rundown on my background and a few of the transition points I went through. So first, I actually did my undergrad at Duke. I did sort of hardware, software, and engineering, and said to myself, hey, how can I try to solve problems in the real world? And found Lockheed Martin and had a lot of fun there for a few years. Had a lot of impact, but it was also a conservative culture where it's hard for a 21-year-old to take on increasing amounts of responsibility. So I went to business school to retool, and this was in 2008, and I sort of came upon two trends I was interested in, cloud and data. And cloud was the early days of things like Amazon Web Services, but they were a thing at that point, and I said, you have to be a big company to play in this game. And data, and the more I looked at this field of big data, the more I realized, hey, I think I kind of know a thing or two about this topic. I feel, just from reading the trade rags, like I could be useful here.
Yep.
So for when summer came around, I just found every single big data company I could. And one of them was called Cloudera. They had about 12 employees.
Oh my God.
And I called them up and said, hey, can I help? Literally, I called the CEO, Mike, and I spoke to all the founders. I spoke to the CTO, Amr, and I think he actually thought I was interviewing for a software engineering job in the beginning. And so I never had the heart to ask him how that interview went. I think it was pretty poor. Anyway, so they said, hey, come help. And it was just, there were just engineers. And so, as we thought about some of the initial product roadmaps or business packagings and things like that, I got to play a really fun role in that. It was a lot of fun, but at the same time, it was a sort of deep technology for technologists. And I said to myself as I was leaving business school, hey, how do we help mere mortals get some value out of data? It's great to help people that can write lots of code, but how do we help less technologically savvy people benefit from these systems? And I found Splunk, and I said, wow, Splunk is sort of this vertically integrated big data application. They didn't call themselves that, but that's in effect what they were. They were serving mostly sysadmins or IT people.
Right.
Still deep, but maybe not quite as deep. And I saw, I had a vision. I saw the ability for them to use this platform to service even less technically sophisticated people over time. So I joined Splunk, and I was there for a couple of years, right up to their IPO, and looked after pretty much anything you could touch. And then right around that time, when Splunk was getting ready to go public, I joked that the VCs were typing into their LinkedIn search box, MBA plus big data. and I was one of the 4 hits, and so in 2012, there were only 4 hits. And so a large number of people reached out. And I decided to make the move over to Excel,
Wow.
where I had known some of the guys. I met them, through sitting in on a board meeting at Cloudera. Focused a lot on data and analytics. And so that depth of sort of knowledge and firsthand experience really enabled me to focus on a domain or focus area, and which is what I did when I started at Excel. I was there for about 6 years, and then I came over to Wing. And at Wing, our focus is really trying to just help entrepreneurs on that journey from zero to product market fit and beyond. And so almost putting on my product manager hat and saying, hey, I want to do one thing really well. There's lots of ways as investors to make money with consumer funds and growth funds and China and India strategies, but let's build a product, us as a VC firm, around one thing, which is helping enterprise B2B entrepreneurs on that initial journey.
Wow. Okay. I don't even know where to begin. I want to go back to Cloudera and Splunk, because those two are incredible companies. Really like innovators in the field that I'm very passionate about. And Splunk, what was it like going into a company that has product market fit with a certain demographic? So right, sysadmins and people who are, still, there might not be necessarily the engineers of the company, but they're very tech savvy. Today, Splunk services, any person who's able to just, to look at graphs and just connect the dots, right? And so what is that like, coming into a company and thinking of this vision and seeing a product that right now serves a certain demographic, but trying to extrapolate it onto, a larger market?
Yeah, I can't take too much credit here, but I can certainly describe the thought process going on at the broader company. And it's roughly as follows. People initially at the time, they actually bought Splunk for an IT use case. Today, if you look at their financials, you might see it's actually a little bit more slanted to security in many cases. But back then it was mostly IT. And you would help people get to this, what we call an aha moment. They'd find some sort of magical value. And if you're deeply technical, it's a super grep. We're grepping across all the different boxes. We're finding that log line we need to solve our problem.
Right.
And if you do that, 100 times faster in Splunk than logging onto each box, you're very happy. And most people actually did that with the free product, with a free trial or a free download. And so they were very excited by the time a salesperson actually contacted them, say like, you want to pay for this.
Is that generally the case that, so obviously this idea of the freemium model is that you try to get your users to an aha moment as they're just, risk-free taking a stab at the software, and then when the salesperson comes around, it's easy. But is that sounds like something very difficult to do, right, for any company?
Look, I think you have I think Splunk was one of the pioneers in the true enterprise space. That sort of easy use, quick value is something that's now become the norm. The consumerization of enterprise, that wasn't the tagline back when Splunk got started. And they made a bunch of very thoughtful product and pricing decisions, but they also, they had a great market. They just had this opportunity where you could make, in the moment of truth, when the pager goes off, you could help someone. Right. If you're building a payroll system, you can delight them, but you can't make them say aha in quite the same way for the most part, right? It just sort of depends what space you're in. And so you help them solve an acute problem in a moment of need. Off the back of that, you were able to build a relationship. You were able to, eventually have a financial transaction that happens. And then the way to think about serving other users is really to say, hey, you've put in X data. What if you put in, 1.25X data, just 25% more data, and now you can enable use case Y, right? And so that's what security was, which was the clear second use case. We have to build more content for the security practitioners. Some of them are very sophisticated in code and write Python and understand the Splunk search language. Others need charts. They need dashboards to do their job. And so we'll build those canonical dashboards. You'll pay us for those. You'll pay us to put more data into Splunk. And now we've serviced the second use case, and then so on and so forth. And I think within IT and security, Splunk has done a phenomenal job, and we'll continue building content to service many other markets over time.
So now you're moving on to Wing VC, and over there you're mentioning that your focus is on helping entrepreneurs get their B2B SaaS platform to that product market fit and beyond, right? From the very early stages. So what are some of the things that you're observing as you're going through this journey? What are some of the, the common challenges that you're observing? Because you're really seeing entrepreneurs very, very early on, as they might have an MVP and they're trying to get these enterprises to buy into it. It doesn't sound very easy to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, so, we have a tendency to work with deep technological founders who have an insight about a particular domain area. And this might be core IT, or it might be in the real world. I spend a lot of time looking at things like computer vision these days, and I have to tell you that there's going to be some value in core enterprise, but a lot of the value of these systems is out in the real world,
right.
Where you can see things and react. And, there's a lot of struggles that these entrepreneurs go through. Hiring the right people is certainly a struggle. Most people don't struggle all that much in hiring the tech talent on in the early days, but that initial business model, that initial go-to-market strategy, sometimes that's something that the entrepreneur has done before. Often this is a new domain, or that might be completely foreign to them. And so that's an area where we really try to roll up our sleeves and not do, but help and support, right? And say, here's an example of a head of sales for a company in an adjacent space that's, at public company scale. You're never going to hire them, but maybe they're great at, a great advisor. Here's an example of the marketing candidate you're going to want in another year, right? And so try to surround them with people and sort of thought partners that they can use to continually evolve their thinking, and just encouraging people to take that experimental mindset. Sometimes people treat go-to-market like this black box where we hire a VP of sales, spend a couple $1 million and see what happens. And, it's 2 years in and a lot of money wasted before you can make any changes.
Interesting.
And so that's where the area for sure where we sort of most repetitively and deeply engage.
It's not very common for institutional VCs to come in that early on, right? I mean, I know a lot of VCs like to join in once you have some great returns and you have a good ARR and you're ready to take your series A and grow.
It depends. You should check out the wing.vc blog if you want to see some pretty deep analysis by my partner, Peter, that really unpacks those trends. What I'd say is as follows. Wing invests in sort of 3 buckets. The experimental seed bucket, which is, we'll call it a $2 million check. Maybe there's some deep technological risk. Can you even build this? Does this market even exist?
Right.
We invest in this round we call the power seed. Which is, maybe it's a $4 to $6 million financing. It takes a long time to build deep enterprise tech. And some people are marketing these things as seed extensions or seed 2s, which in my humble opinion is not great marketing. Someone says, oh, I've raised my seed extension. And I say, I'm sorry for your loss. I think we could do better in branding these things. And then the classic Series A, which, fluctuates a bit, right. Sort of ramped up really high in 2019. Maybe this is the $8 to $15 million check size. And Wing actually aspires to invest across this entire spectrum.
Wonderful.
And I think you see some large firms, they sort of dabble. They'll play in this sort of experimental seed or power seed phase. Certainly in light of COVID, we've seen some people redouble their efforts a little bit there. But you're right. A lot of people are waiting for the Series A, and 82% of the Series A's these days are post-revenue. And if you look at the valuations, what are the Series A's? These are the Series B's from a decade ago, is basically what they are. And so this power seed phase where, we have a little bit of product, we're still pre-revenue in many cases. We've engaged with the customers meaningfully. That's an area that we feel really well equipped to play. We're happy to roll up our sleeves. We're happy to talk to those customers and figure things out. With the entrepreneur. There's some firms that will participate and engage in such a process, and there's many others that will say, hey, let's just wait until it's obvious.
Right. So investing in deep technology, it's a different type of investment than going mainly off of the market and just the financials. You're actually looking sometimes at founders who are really they think that they've understood their niche much better than others, and they are able to develop something that is cutting edge and that is really going to innovate on their domain. They're not just going and trying to take a similar technology that exists and implement it into another market. How do you go even about doing proper due diligence on that? And how do you, as a venture capital firm, support entrepreneurs who are dedicated to deep technology? Because innately they're spending, years of research on these things, and then you have to come in and you have to determine within a matter of days or weeks whether this is something that you believe in.
Yeah, that the way you describe it makes it sound hard. On the other end, I don't know how hard it is, right? So I have enough of a technical background that I can't go toe to toe with these entrepreneurs. Maybe I can pretend for some period of time, but I can determine whether or not something is real. Whether it's is this BS or is this real? And then if it's real, we do the following. One, we're going to find the foremost domain authority to help validate, the elements of risk that we see in the technology, whether that's the computer vision or the AI or the containers or, whatever it happens to be. And then, depending on the state of the product, we're going to go out and talk to the customers and understand what their perception is, what it is that they have and haven't been able to validate, what it is that they need, how it is that they're going to procure. And then we sort of line everything up and say, all right, here's the scorecard, here's the risks and opportunities we see. Does this make sense? And do we think that this entrepreneur is uniquely capable of navigating through this environment?
Wow, very, very cool. And it really sounds like a lot of the experiences that you've had leading up to the venture capital world have really, come together to give you this balanced and well-rounded insight into the different things that you're doing. Do you feel, and I'm speaking as a young entrepreneur, and a lot of my friends who are following this, they're also young engineers, young entrepreneurs, perhaps out of 8200 in Israel, or perhaps out of Stanford or MIT here in the US. And now my question is, you had a variety of different experiences, both in engineering and then product management and business. Do you think there are some experiences that were more worthy of your time than others? That because in my generation, we have to make a lot of decisions all the time. Which companies do we go to? What fields do we study? How long do I want to be an engineer before I make my transition to product management? Just as an example, it's something that I'm grappling with and a lot of my friends are grappling with.
Yeah.
Which experiences do you think really moved the needle for you?
Well, look, it all depends what you want to accomplish in your career. And I'll make 2 points. One, it's almost impossible to become more technical over time. Once you leave the engineering ranks, you've left the engineering ranks. Most people don't circle back, right? And so people often rush to get on with it or become a product manager or whatever that is. But for the most part, that's a one-way trip. So, choose your decision path wisely and know that, maybe 20, 30 years ago, people didn't really empower technical ICs, individual contributors, in the same way that they do today. And you had to become at least a manager, right? Or your paycheck wasn't getting any bigger. And companies like Google and others have done a great job really saying, hey, there's a path to become, a level 8 or whatever it is, right, IC, and get rewarded for it. So that's a viable career strategy.
Actually, one of the most incredible innovative things that I've observed in the Israeli military is this exact same idea that the Israeli military it's known that you want to go higher, you have to become an officer and you have to grow your ranks and get your different ranks or whatever. And all of a sudden in the intelligence unit, they're saying, we actually have a new method. You don't have to be an officer. You can be a professional technologist and get paid just as much, and they get paid more than the officers, and they become this professional persona.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about it, some engineers are not the most gregarious people in the world. Some of them love to manage, love to talk to people. There's others that don't. They're two orthogonal skill sets, and why you would forcibly lump them together, creates suboptimal allocation of talent resources.
100%. 100%.
So one, don't rush to become less technical. Two, I think being a CEO or being a product manager is the closest that you can get to possibly to preparing yourself for a career in venture. And what I mean by that is simply that these people sit at the intersection of business and technology. They're not just writing the code and they're not just selling it. And that ability to sit on both sides of the fence is very important in evaluating a business. I wish it was just build the right technology or the best technology and that wins. That's decidedly not the case in the real world. So you really need both perspectives. And I joke with product managers that venture capital is sort of like meta product management in some sense. You don't get to write any of the specs. You don't get to manage the CEOs in the same way, but at a different level, that is sort of how I think about the space.
I haven't thought about this transition and that the product management side has such a big influence on the venture capital work. And I don't believe that most venture capitalists have had much product management experience. I know some of them have. A lot of them come from financial backgrounds, right? From finance or potentially CEO. But this is something that is it's very interesting to me.
Well, particularly at the early stage of enterprise B2B companies, I think it's a really relevant background to have.
Definitely.
When you're out raising your growth capital round, it can still be interesting, but there's a lot of people that are going to be a lot more facile with the metrics and the spreadsheets.
Definitely.
But in that early days, having a support system, a thought partner to help navigate some of those issues on the product side, I think can be immensely valuable.
Right.
And hopefully some of the entrepreneurs I work with have found that to be the case.
Jake, this was so enjoyable, and time just goes by way too quickly on this show. I always joke that I wish I called it 30-minute leaders instead of 20-minute leaders, but now I'm stuck with the name, so I have to hold on to 20 minutes. But before we go, I have to ask you for 3 words that you would use to describe yourself. 3
words that describe myself. I'm diligent. I think I try to work hard. I'm dependable. I'm there when I'm needed, and
that's
that's
not something that you take for granted. Dependable. It's something that I'm learning over time.
I'm there in good times and bad times. There's a lot of stress as being an entrepreneur, and you need folks that are going to show up when you need it. And also I have to go for the alliteration, so probably deep. I'm willing to go deep to really understand what it is that people are building and trying to accomplish. So there you go.
I love it. So dependent, diligent, and deep. Jake, thank you very, very much. It was wonderful. I learned so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for doing it.
Take care. Bye-bye.